I'm continuing my discussion of fascism as a way of responding to Joe Biden's allegation that patriots and Trumpsters and Make America Great Again types are somehow semi-fascist. I talked in the last segment about Giovanni Gentile, the philosopher of fascism. Gentile was kind of the mentor for Mussolini. And Mussolini says, I'm quoting, by the way, from my book, The Big Lie, which is kind of the authoritative work on the subject, worth reading if you haven't read it yet. Quote, "It was Gentile," this is Mussolini, "who prepared the road for those like me who wished to take it." By the way, both Mussolini and Gentile come from the far left. They were both prominent socialists and Marxists. But now I want to turn to the sort of totemic figure of fascism, perhaps the figure better known than Mussolini. This is, of course, Adolf Hitler. Here's Hitler in a 1927 speech. "We are socialists." Now, this is worth pausing on for a second because it is amazing how many people to this day deny that Hitler was a socialist or that Hitler's movement was a socialist movement. It doesn't matter that they call themselves National Socialists. The idea that we hear from the left, well, they didn't mean it. They just used the term socialist as if to say this was just a kind of a marketing or labeling technique. But here's Hitler. "We are socialists. We are the enemies of today's capitalist system of exploitation, and we are determined to destroy the system under all conditions." Later, Goebbels, the chief propaganda minister for Hitler, was asked, when you talk about National Socialism, which is more important, the national part, which is nationalism, or the socialism part? And Goebbels was very candid. He goes, the most important part is socialism. Here I'm quoting Goebbels. "What has priority and what comes second? First socialism and then national liberation." So even though fascism and National Socialism is a marriage between two distinct ideas, nationalism on the one hand, socialism on the other, it's very clear that the Nazis gave priority to the socialism. And now, you can see all of this in the Nazi party's 25-point program. They had to campaign. And this puts the lie to the nonsense that they were just using this as a marketing slogan, because after all, if you are campaigning in a national election and you put this forward as your platform, that's what the people are sort of electing you to do. That is your face to the German people. And so it's interesting that when you look at the Nazi 25-point program, and it's worth going down the list and just keeping in mind, does this sound more like the Biden Democrats? Does this sound more like the left? Or does this sound more like the Trump agenda, the MAGA agenda, the right? So let's go through some of the Nazi 25-point program. Nationalization of large corporations and trusts. I think we know which side of the aisle that falls on. Government control of banking and credit. The seizure of land without compensation for public use. All of this sounds very collectivist, and no surprise, this is the essence of what the fascist ideology is. The splitting of large land holdings into smaller units, confiscation of so-called war profits, prosecution of bankers and other lenders on the grounds of usury. The Nazis had their own venom directed at their own version of Wall Street. They were kind of Occupy Wall Street types. Abolition of incomes unearned by work. Profit sharing for workers in all large companies, a broader pension system paying higher benefits, universal free health care and education. Really, when you go down this list, and admittedly there are some sort of antique words on the list. For example, the Nazis don't talk about exploitative rates of interest or greed. They talk about usury. Usury is really the old word for exorbitantly high, Shylockian, if you will, rates of interest. So you'd have to make some appropriate or sort of modernizing substitutions. But when you do, the whole Nazi platform reads like the Democratic Party platform. In fact, it's kind of like you take the Nazi 25-point program, and let's say you were to just cross out the word Nazi. just write in the word Democrat. And then you just go to college campuses around America and you say, let me read you the Democratic Party platform. But in fact, of course, you're reading the Nazi platform. And you just go down the list. I bet you that leftist students would be absolutely cheering and applauding. They'd be like, yeah, this is awesome. This is great. Who came up with this? Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders? Was it the Obama people around Joe Biden? Well, of course, the correct answer is none of the above. The people who came up with this were the young Adolf Hitler. At least he may not have originally drafted it, but he signed off on it. And it was all the key Nazi theoreticians and activists and goons that put this platform together. And so you begin to see here how the word fascism, a term that describes the left, that describes the collectivism, and sure, there's an authoritarian strain in fascism, but it is collectivist or statist authoritarianism. And this is really what the left tries to hide today. It's like after World War II, they have done a work that has now lasted two generations of hiding the leftist ideological roots of both fascism and Nazism.